Ryan, you have enough hair? We're good?
We're all good.
More than enough.
My sister's making a last minute wardrobe change. Big choice.
I've just got hot, just think,
Yeah.
Uncharacteristic sunny day here.
Yeah. Okay, it's 11 o'clock. Look at that. This is the show we're calling Bring It In, True Hoop TV's effort from home in isolation. Thank you everyone for joining us. Today we have pretty fun lineup. Ryan Pannone, head coach of the Erie BayHawks, has a great life story that we're going to get into with David Thorpe, who has known Ryan Pannone for his entire life. But first, speaking of people known for entire life, this is my sister, Emily Abbott, live from England. How are you doing?
I'm very well, thank you.
So everybody's talking about coronavirus. We think you, in fact, are a human superhero because you have recovered from it, more or less. Right?
Exactly. I'm more or less recovered, and I'm pretty sure I had it because I had partly the whole world is getting a bad fever, and I had a really bad fever, and then I started hearing more and more everyone else's symptoms. I had a really bad fever for about a week that I kind of just kept waking up, asleep all the time, and then waking up all sweaty. And then I had a really bad pain down my neck and across my shoulders, which I overheard one of my neighbors out the window saying that's what he'd had. That's what I had. And headache. But the main symptom that I had that really made me, actually at the beginning made me think I didn't have it, is because I couldn't taste anything. And then I realized I couldn't smell anything. And then I had a really weird taste in my mouth the whole time. I thought it was just so prominent. Like I was telling you yesterday, Hen, wasn't it, that I was, merrily helping myself to a glass of wine at home, a wine I know well, and and I was like, what's wrong with this? It's disgusting. And
you didn't throw it out, did you?
Of course not. Things
yeah,
that but I actually did go over to the fridge and just like look at it again. Like, what? I've had countless bottles of this, and it just, that seems really weird. And if anyone who knows me, that's a bad, things are bad if I can't stomach a glass of wine. And I thought, well, I guess I don't have coronavirus. So it seems really odd, and it's the sort of thing like our dad always says, isn't it? Like go for the most logical explanation, and everyone in the world's got a fever and you've got a fever and feeling awful. But there'd been no mention of this mouth thing, and I thought, I guess I must have something else. And then it was actually just early this week when I started to feel better. And I think, as I was saying to you, cannot overestimate how great it is to have a regular body temperature. I was like, it's good. I still have feel a bit, not 100%, but the fever's gone and everything. But my mouth still felt strange. And I was speaking to a friend of mine, one of my work colleagues actually in Spain, and he and his family had obviously gone down in the classic way. Somebody had been skiing and came back with a headache, and then they all went down. And he said to me, just by the by, he's like, and it's like this terrible taste in my mouth. I can't even drink a beer. I was like, what? And then you sent me that article from the New York Times about this mouth and not being able, and it's true, because it's actually what you realize is it's you can't taste, but it's that you can't smell. It's really weird. I think I was showing you yesterday, when you just can put your nose into, horseradish, anything. I can't smell anything. So it's so that's when I then thought, I think I've definitely had it, and I'm getting better, and I feel a little bit sort of over the moon about it, actually, because also I think if it hadn't been coronavirus, I would have had wasted those 2 weeks feeling awful, and then still have coronavirus to look forward to.
Right. Well, it is a little bit. I mean, honestly, talking to you yesterday was the first sort of
Oh, Hen, you paused.
Yeah, he's had some.
My back?
There you go. You're back.
Sorry, I need to try harder. Yeah, I'm gonna try to really send my. Oh no, I think it's happening again.
No, you're right now.
So, but you are now smiling, and you don't have the anxiety the whole world has.
No.
And you're a little more ready to go deliver groceries to grandparents, or you're on the road to being a recovered human, which is much the best state to be in this time in 2020. So I wanted to have you on just to sort of have one. I know it's different for everybody, but at least for some of us, it's going to be like your story, which is a much better way to be.
It's a much better way to be. No, exactly. And I mean, that's the thing. Feel really pleased to have had it, actually. And from, you know, and we were listening to David Epstein the other day, weren't we, with about the antibodies, and there seems you do have that sort of feeling like there's so much now. I mean, obviously, I think I would need to have a, you know, before I start throwing myself into old people's homes and things, I, you know, obviously need like a test or something. But once you've had it, then that's what I feel like. Oh, you can be useful. You know, can go to deliver food to old people, as we were saying, or help, you know, help in the hospital.
Thorpe,
you know,
she can deliver food to you officially.
It's a long trip though from England.
Yeah. Worth it though. Worth it.
Yeah, if anybody needs anything, let me know. So,
I'm sort of tired of going to the grocery store, so if you wouldn't mind, that'd be great.
So full of beans. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, and I think you're right. I think especially getting it, like, it's quite early days here in England, and I actually feel really I feel like it was a good idea, you know, really relieved.
Yeah. Okay, I should have mentioned earlier, if anybody has questions, as Randy Shane has already role modeled, click the little chat thing. It'll pop up on the right, and then you can put your questions in there. And we're going to do the whole show, and we'll get to questions. And if you want your question to be on video, then put the word video with your question, and we'll have you on video. We have a couple of quick more minutes here, though. And Ryan, you have coached all over the world. My sister works in fashion, has worked in fashion in Europe for all these years. And one of the things I've asked her to sort of examine through the years is, I theorize that like NBA head coaches are among the worst dressed of the coaches of different sports around the world. And I wonder if you two could have a quick fashion summit where you kind of talk about, you know, what we could learn from Europe and what we should be doing better in this regard.
So one of the biggest things that I learned my first year in Hapoel Jerusalem, we had an Italian coach named Simone Piangiani, and who's the all-time winningest coach in the history of Italian basketball, went to 2 EuroLeague Final Fours with Siena, was most recently the coach of Armani Milano before Ray Messina took over. And as he told me, probably on my third day, you will not learn much about basketball, but life, fashion, and the food, I will teach you much of. And so I think one of the biggest mistakes that Americans make, which is a crime to him, is wearing a blue suit with brown shoes. That is like the ultimate offense. And we were actually playing one of the teams in the Israeli league, and the coach wore a blue suit with brown shoes, and before the game he had to correct him. And then we played them in the playoffs, and he wouldn't wear brown shoes. He wore black shoes with the blue suit. There was a big interview about it. And our assistants, some of our assistants this year for our team, the Erie BayHawks, would wear a blue suit with brown shoes, and I'd have to screenshot it and send it to them and label it to Americans.
What's your take on that, Emily?
I knew we'd come to the right place. Yeah. Can you weigh in on this?
No, it is true. I mean, I'm certainly here. I see more, you know, as I think I've said to Henry, like, you know, nobody looks good in America as like Pep Guardiola coaching, you know, when he was coaching, first of all, Barca, and then whatever he's doing now, Chelsea stuff, and Manchester City. And, you know, they just look really good. And it is, Henry and I've tried to have a look at it, haven't we? It's hard to exactly pinpoint it, but certainly they're not wearing tracksuit.
Yeah.
They're not wearing sweatpants.
Top European football coaches look amazing. Every one of them.
So good.
Things with scarves and things with like
my plan
Adidas pants.
To go to Italy and have Simone pick out suits for me this summer, because my goal was to be the best dressed coach in the G League, to really try to stick out and wear the European style cut suit. And unfortunately, I didn't make it over to Italy, but I made sure to send him pictures to make sure he was okay with what I was wearing. That would be the biggest offense to him. Not the fact that we don't play European style basketball, but that I dress like an American.
But also, don't you think like the American coaches seem to like wear the players' uniform, don't they? Kind of. I mean, that's what seems, I think, lets them down, because they don't have the same body as the professional athletes. Do you think that's?
They wear far different style suits for sure.
Yeah. There are things happening with khakis too that I feel would never not fly in Europe.
Khakis,
We
really?
never wear khaki with a sort of, Air Tex polo tucked in around your tummy with a belt. Never happened.
I mean, when in 8th grade in Oregon, if you were dressing up for school, it was like you would wear khakis. That was maybe a law. I'm not sure, but at some point I read this thing where somebody was writing about life in Paris, and they're like, I'm not aware of anybody in Paris who wears khakis who isn't an American tourist. And I was like, oh, this is shocking news.
It's how we
So
identify the American tourists on the streets in Barcelona. Exactly that. Yeah.
Yeah, that's how you can tell. Yeah.
I feel like you guys are just making fun of us.
It might sound like that.
And I don't know khaki pants, just to be clear. And my suits came from the wool of a sheep in Scotland. Take that, you two.
Sounds very good.
Is that, in your experience, is that a good criteria? Do you end up looking good if it's Scottish wool?
I was very pleased with the work that Taylor did.
Okay. Well, I think we've had an interesting start to the show. So, number one, coronavirus, good to have behind you. Number two, bad fashion, good to have behind you, right? This is where we are. Let me thank you so much. Please hang out if you'd like, and we may come back to you for more participation at any time. And now I'm going to rattle off Ryan's biography, and I'm glad you feel better.
Yes, thanks, Henny.
Yes.
Okay, so Ryan Pannone coached high school up the road from David Thorpe in Florida. Then he worked for David Thorpe. Then he worked for junior college in Alabama, then worked for David Thorpe again. Then he was an assistant coach in China, and then Germany, and then Israel. And then he was a head coach in Slovakia, where I think we believe he was the youngest first division coach, American coach. And then he went back to Jerusalem, where he was the top assistant coaching Amari Stoudemire team. And then he had an interview with Trajan Langdon, Alvin Gentry, David Griffin of the Pelicans, and they recently hired you to become the head coach of the Erie BayHawks in the G League. Did I miss anything, Ryan?
I was fortunate to spend a few months in South Korea.
Oh, I did miss one. There you go.
I did know that, but I wasn't sure where that fit into your bio. But you weren't coaching a pro team. You were developing players?
Yeah, so it was I spent probably about close to just under 5 months in 2 years there in the off season, handling their off season development for their team.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
So David's going to take over as Ryan's going to bring lessons from all of that to the future and everything.
Yeah. So Ryan, I was telling Henry that you paid your dues, man. You've worked very, very hard. I've known you since I think you were 19. But our listeners don't care as much about some of the things that I could talk to you about all day as a basketball coach. But you do study a lot of European basketball. I listened to Steve Kerr yesterday talking about how he watches 2 college games a day to help his team in the draft process. You're probably still watching European games, every day on Synergy. What do you know about guys that have declared for the draft or likely will declare for the draft, like the Hayes kid from France, who's actually his parents are from Florida, and or his dad is, and then Denny Avdija, the Israeli that might go number 1, certainly top 3 or 4. Have you seen any of those guys and any thoughts on how they might project here?
So, I mean, to be fair, most of the time when I'm watching European basketball, which is ideally every day of my life to make me happy, I study more of the coaches. My goal when I'm doing it is to improve for myself as a coach as opposed to studying prospects and players. And, I'm focusing on the tactical game that European basketball is so famous for, to try to figure out what I can steal and add to our team or to myself as a coach, and trying to catalog them. And being in the Israeli league, we played against Denny. He played some sparingly minutes against us, and there's definitely a big jump in his game that he's made from this year to last year. And, you could see in the time that he was in, not only was he a young, talented prospect, but his confidence. He wasn't afraid to get out there and play against high-level guys like Amari Stoudemire or guys such as Jay Coven Brown, James Feldine, Tayshaun Thomas. as a young player. And oftentimes when those guys step on the floor, there's a confidence issue, a physicality issue, and he played, as we would say, to the wall. And you could see his IQ, his feel, his confidence in the sparing minutes that he played. And then obviously he's had a very good year in the EuroLeague and for Maccabi Tel Aviv until the season was canceled this year.
So you and I speak.
Can I jump in for 1 second?
Yeah, sure.
Who is he? Like he plays what position? He's what, 19? How old? Can you just give us a little big picture?
Ryan?
Thorpe. I roll with Coach Thorpe. You've watched him way more than me.
Oh, so so basically, well, you can comment on yours, but he's almost like a 1 through 4, Henry. I could probably play some small 5, depending on how small the other team's 5 was. He's Ryan. I've spent many hours with Omri Caspi over the years, who's a good NBA player for 10 years, who's been the best Israeli of all time. Denny's another level above. Wouldn't you say, Ryan?
I'd say he's got a chance to be. I mean,
in terms of prospect.
In terms of a prospect, he's got a chance to be, and as we know, unfortunately, the NBA can, chew these guys out and get them out the league quick. And he's got another level of talent, I think, from Omri. And it's something, obviously, that was one of the most beautiful things, right? He played a little bit with Omri this year. So seeing the torch starting to be passed down to the future of Israeli basketball was something that was really neat.
Yeah, for Maccabi, that's true. So you and I talk a ton whenever you are in the world through WhatsApp, and you're like a son to me. And so I'm not going to get into our relationship a whole lot, but there's something you used to always tell me in our very loving conversations where you tended to make fun of me. And that was your unbridled appreciation for Amari Stoudemire, who you coached 2 different times. Honestly, and Amari's from our area. So I've known of him and went to, in fact, we just wrote about this, Henry, last week, I think, where I saw him play when he was a high school senior. The stories you told me were nothing like the kind of image I think he has in America. So if you could give us your quick breakdown of who he is as a man, and maybe share some of the stories you shared with me over kind of showing what kind of person he was as a teammate there.
The very first time I met Amari, the team sent me down to Miami to work him out for 2.5 weeks before training camp to make sure he was in shape.
And you were nervous. I remember you saying to me, Coach, what if he just ignores me? All your pros are used to you, so of course they treat me just as good as they treat you. This guy doesn't know Coach Thorpe. How's he going to treat me? You were nervous about it.
Yeah, I mean, it was something, he doesn't know me, doesn't know anything about me. He's obviously been an NBA superstar, worked with some of the best coaches in the world. And the team sending me down there as this, at the time I was 55 pounds heavier. So I'm an overweight, short guy that never played at a high level. And, you don't.
Are you wearing brown shoes? At
that time I was probably wearing brown shoes with blue suit. And,
that sucks.
Yeah, he totally would have judged me because one thing Simone loved about Amari is his understanding and appreciation of the fashion. And he would always say that. He understands the fashion, the cars, the food. So, I studied and did a breakdown of every possible thing of Amari and came up with his strengths and weaknesses. An example, he was, 60%, from the field when he attacked to the middle out of the post as opposed to below 30% attacking baseline, which is one of the Thorpe rules based on his death, and not to mention the different turnovers, putting himself under the basket. And so we get to our first workout and, he's conducting, all right, I want to do this, I want to do that, I want to do this, I want to do that. And for about the first 30 minutes, and then I just slowly tried to chime in of, the way he was utilizing his jab step and the way he was attacking, out of the post. And, Amari, you're 60% here, you're here. After the workout, he said, how do you know that? And I said, I broke down every shot that you had. And I put it all together. And he goes, you have it on video? I said, yeah. He goes, come over to my house tomorrow and let's watch it. I was like, oh, shit. Like, all right. I felt like this was a good chance for me, to show that I really put a lot of time and effort into what we were talking about. I just come out here and making it up and, deciding, all right, this is what we have to do in the workout. This is what I see. And I get over there and he's got his kids there. And it was my first impression of him. He's at his beautiful home with his beautiful family. And we get ready to start to sit down and watch film. And he starts playing with one of his kids and disciplining another kid and holding them accountable. and also telling him how much he loves him, but how he's got to grow up to be a man, and this isn't how a man acts. And, within the first 10 minutes, you're seeing a side of Amari Stoudemire that no one talks about, and how much he loves being a father, how much he loves his kid. And he was able to show all of them love and appreciation while also holding them accountable. And he wasn't afraid. They were doing something, they were being loud, they were being destructive, and he disciplined them while also putting his arm around them, telling them how much he loved them. But this isn't how a man acts. This isn't how a grown-up acts. And then we went through on the film, and he's so inquisitive. That guy. People talk about basketball. He loves basketball. I mean, he can go anywhere in the world for no money and just can play basketball and be happy. And I got a chance to get an inside peek into his life, Amari Stoudemire, off the floor. And, it opened my eyes and brought out. I was like, man, this guy is everything you want in a person, and his mentality as a father. And at the time, I wasn't a father yet, but I had a big appreciation of the way that he was with his kids and how important his kids were to him.
Tell him how it was, though, when you coached him there, just things like hotel and travel. And this is a first-team All-NBA player. I don't know how much money he made, but well over $100 million. I'm certain of that. Maybe near $200 million.
Yeah, it was over 200.
Right. And yet, tell him how life is there for him and how he handled it when you could easily be a diva, more or less like a celebrity, and act like you're above it.
I mean, we, first off, we get to Israel and we developed a good relationship. And, first thing you notice in any European basketball, right, the facilities for most even high-level international teams are nowhere near as good as mid-major Division I schools. And we have our locker room. We have our practice court, which has since been refinished. And, he walks and goes, all right, this is a practice gym. Let's get to work. As soon as he gets there, he wanted to work and get down on the floor. And, we travel commercial, and we travel we stay at, relatively nice hotels, but sometimes you're in places like the Ukraine, which we were in year 2. And we had our flight was canceled. We had to stay overnight in the Ukraine. We had to walk about 15 minutes in a blizzard. I mean, unbelievably freezing cold.
Wow.
We get there, and it is like less than a 1-star hotel. It was unbelievably such a low, it's something that would be a $30, $20 a night hotel in the United States. And he goes to check into his room, and a lady starts screaming. He opens up the door, and a lady's screaming. And at this point, it's like 3 o'clock in the morning, long travel day, terrible experience. And he comes back down to the lobby, and he's just laughing. He's like, someone was in the room, like, is there another room I could have? And, he could sit there and have such an ego about it. And everywhere we went, everyone wanted to talk to him. Everyone wanted an autograph. And we were actually playing Maccabi Tel Aviv in preseason and for the Cup. And fans during the game were just screaming his name, wearing a Maccabi jersey, but holding up his jersey. And he took time to go to every fan, sign the autograph, even though there was such a major rivalry. And he took so much time out in airports and coffee shops. People come up and talk to him, and he'd spend time and not just sign an autograph, take a picture. He would engage with them and be authentic. And what people don't realize about Amari is he loves basketball. He loves people. His work ethic was unbelievable, and his mentality was unbelievable. I mean, he didn't register initially for the Israeli games both years, and we'd be in shoot-around, and he wasn't even playing.
Right, you only play in the the
right.
Champions League, not the Israeli League.
In
right.
Euro Cup and Champions League, and then eventually played in the Israeli League. And we'd be going through 5-on-0, and he's not even playing. And he'd be going through it. He'd tell me a story about Glenn Robinson, why he's a big dog. And be like, I'm the big dog now. So he'd go through 5-on-0 and be like, the big dog's down here, coach. The big dog's down here. You need a bucket. Give it to the big dog. Give it to the big dog. Go ahead, call that play. And he's just going through 5-on-0 and he's not even playing, all enthusiastic and engaging. And you could do the most basic team shooting drill, and he's, all right, let's go. We got to win. And if his team lost, he would be pissed, and he'd be on guys for not taking it serious. And, one thing you grow to appreciate about Amari is his love and passion for the game. And every time he's subbed out, Ryan, what you see? What do I got to do better out there? I mean, he just wants to be coached, wants to be better. And at this time, he's 36 years old. He's an NBA All-Star, and he's in Israel. And the other thing that was amazing for him to get to see is people don't realize, they thought he was trying to get the Israeli passport just to play as an Israeli. And he takes his faith so serious. I mean, especially from year 1 to year 2, he would go to all the time to temple. He was studying and learning the Hebrew language. Which is
not easy.
No. I mean, he would be before practice in his locker room going over his homework, from Hebrew school. And he's someone that people don't understand, how invested that guy's in. And here he is. He's made $200 million. He's an NBA All-Star. He's going to school. He's going to school for hours a day to learn the Hebrew language, to really invest in his faith.
Yeah.
And you can't help but appreciate his commitment to basketball, to his faith, to his family. And, I don't think he gets the recognition that other people get for his work ethic and his leadership.
Why did he go to Israel?
He was a part owner of the team. He considers himself an Israeli, and he's Jewish, and he wanted to live in Jerusalem and really take part of not just the basketball, but the faith. And he had other options throughout Europe and internationally in China for a lot more money. And, he gets there. He's the lowest paid guy on the team. He is there to play basketball and for his faith. And that guy was the hardest worker on the team, always wanted to do extra, always wanted to do more, always wanted to watch film. His desire to improve and grow was amazing. It's interesting, especially now being in the G League. I wish he was on our team every day, because people don't understand. They think of Amari, he was just super athletic. That's why he was good. No, I mean, Amari was a skilled, hardworking guy, and it was interesting to hear different stories, like from Coach Gentry and people about how he grew up. How he really had to grow up and learn from being a rookie in the NBA, to being a pro and taking care of his body.
I wanted you to talk about you love European games so much. You like to joke about it. You call it the beautiful game, which I know it is. So kind of compare and contrast your not just your experiences in Europe, but what you're seeing as a coach with those players to the NBA/G League. And I know, just for everyone who's going to listen to this, you don't watch a ton of the NBA because you are so invested in your G League team. Trust me, I know this, because when I ask you questions with the NBA, too often you don't know the answer, but you could tell me anything I would want about the G League. But still, we're talking about American-based players. So contrast the European game and the NBA game and the G League.
Yeah, I mean, in the NBA, I watch predominantly, obviously, the Pelicans, our team, and obviously the ones that they're playing, but really try to study the Pelicans and the Utah Jazz, the Boston Celtics, and the different teams that try to play with that European philosophy and style. And obviously,
which is what? Explain that.
The difference between American basketball and European basketball is the mentality on offense specifically, which it's a team game, right? It's 5 players playing as one. In America, we talk about spacing and ball movement. And in Europe, this is the formula I've come up with. Offense equals spacing plus timing plus reading plus ball movement plus player movement. And in the NBA, you're seeing them steal more of the spacing and the reading and the ball movement. But in Europe, the player movement is at a much higher level. Obviously, there's some reasons behind that. In Europe, you don't have the defensive 3 seconds. It's a more physical game, right?
Way more
try
physical.
to take away the paint. And so your player movement is what breaks and distorts the shell defense. And it's what basically you're trying to offensively to create the offensive advantage, keep the offensive advantage, and then use the offensive advantage through the player movement and ball movement. And everything is played as a team. Oftentimes in America, an example, right, is switching defense is evolving. People think of attacking switching defense with 1 player or 2 player, whether it's attacking the post, with the guard on it, or attacking the post player from the perimeter with the guard and trying to attack them off the bounce, to where Europe attacking switching defense, even at the mismatch portion, is played with 3, 4, and 5 people, right? You're trying to attack the switch to basically force the defense to commit and create that advantage. And it's not about the player that's attacking the switch scoring. It's about the player that's attacking the switch creating the advantage. And they attack the switch as a team. So in America, we oftentimes attack it through isolation.
Right. Well, you made a point. I remember you and I were talking once. I don't remember if it was in the locker room before one of your games. Before games, Henry, Ryan's in his little coach's locker room within G League is, nothing fancy. And he's X&O'ing what might be the next dead ball that he's got to be faced with. And he wants to do it as fast as possible. Just like someone might edit their speech or you'll edit the articles I write to make sure it's as clean as possible. That's what he's doing. But you made a point of talking to me about when in Europe, when they see that mismatch, they won't just go right to it. They might throw 2 or 3 passes, second side, third side, spread the floor, then get the mismatch. Really put the defense in a predicament. Now they have to choose to go help from a very spread shell, and then there's easy cuts for dunks or threes, or they can't because it's so far spread, and they just go get the bucket, right?
Yeah, and one of the philosophies in Europe, right, if you're trying to attack a specific player, whether he's a poor defender, and you almost look in your scouting to identify 2 to 3 poor closeout defenders, right, and then what would be your bad pick and roll defenders, and you're trying to attack those specific guys, create the advantage to where specific players are in the pick and roll, or you're attacking them on the closeout. And in Europe, what you're trying to do is disguise it, right? You don't want to attack it on the first side because everyone's going to load up into their shell defense and take it away. So you're forcing the ball, you're allowing the ball to go side to side, and on the second to third side, you're now putting that player in the closeout. And what you do is you end up attacking them 4 times in a row because it's on the second to third side. The other coach may not realize what you're trying to do. And at that point, the shell defense is broken because of the player movement. You've distorted it, and now they can't help and load as much on that second to third side, to where specifically in the G League, oftentimes there's not a second to third side in your offensive position. So you can't do that,
It's very hard to watch the G League. Ron, I've described the G League, and somebody who watched it pretty daily or nightly. The talent level, I thought, exploded the last couple of years compared to what had been with the D League. Mostly young players. So compared to Europe, the Europeans are much more experienced, higher IQ. The G League talent is off the charts, in my opinion. Maybe the second most talented league in the world behind the NBA in terms of projected talent. They just don't know how to play typically, to your point about there is no second or third side. First guy who gets it is shooting it. There's a rule in the NBA, Henry, where you don't help same side corner 3. You don't help off that guy. But you can in the G League, right? And someone wrote about this recently because that
was his philosophy, yeah.
They're not going to pass it. The guy with the ball, Nick Nurse said that, right? The guy with the ball is not going to pass. It drives me crazy. So talk to me about having gone from high-level Europe at Jerusalem to the G League team, and your team wasn't so good, partly because your two-way players were with the Pelicans a good amount. But you've seen all the teams. How would you compare those?
Well, I mean, there's a major difference, right? At the high-level Europe, as we know, a lot of the import players, number one, you could exchange and they could be on an NBA roster.
Exactly
those guys, as we know in the NBA, there's a lot of luck to it, right? Right situation, right system, right coach, right opportunity. I mean, there's no question that a lot of the guys in high-level Europe, the American players in high-level Europe, could play in the NBA. You could switch out the end of the rosters and you wouldn't know the difference. And so a lot of times the guys in the G League are the talent level of the Americans internationally, but those guys are 6-7 years older with experience and high-level coaching. And in the G League, it's super athletic, really talented guys, a little bit younger league because those are the more up-and-coming prospects, and eventually those talented players either make it to the NBA or go internationally to Asia or to Europe to make more money. And, I don't think you can compare the level of the player IQ-wise, experience-wise, skill-wise, tactically, and a big part of that is youth and age.
Yeah.
But there's a reason why, when the G League teams go over and play in the FIBA Cup and in February, they lose. The previous year, the Austin Spurs went over to South America and they lost. This year, RGV went over and played against Tenerife and in Spain and lost. And, tactically, it's a much different game. In the G League, you're focused on trying to get your players to pass the ball, play unselfish, play hard. And in Europe, it's a far more tactical game. Every possession in Europe matters because every game you're expected to win, even if you're the worst team in the league. Last year in Israel, the worst team in the league fired 4 or 5 coaches because the losing was not acceptable, even though they had zero chance of winning. It wasn't a coaching issue, but that's the mentality. Every possession matters. Every loss is devastating, to where in the G League and the NBA, you have 50 games in a short amount of time. You have 82 games. You have to have that next game mentality. And you oftentimes have 4 games in a week, and if every loss is devastating, it kills the mentality of your team. So your approach and mindset is different. And in the G League specifically, right, development is number 1, and winning becomes second. And I think that oftentimes it shades the mindset of the player and the people involved in the G League to where they begin to have this approach of winning doesn't matter, development matters. But winning matters. Winning matters everywhere because winning is a part of player development. And if you take a look at the G League specifically, if you can't help your G League team win, how can you help an NBA team win? Right? And NBA teams that are signing guys out of the G League, not the draft picks that they stash there to develop, not the two-way players, but guys that they're signing to Exhibit 10s, are usually the bottom half of the league in the NBA. And they're looking for someone that can help their team win, whether it's put pressure on guys in practice, get guys to practice harder, get guys to feel like someone's coming for the roster spot, or maybe it's a player that is talented in the G League and playing well that can help their team win. And those guys are typically signed off winning teams in the G League. So it's the G League is a unique mindset to where in Europe every game matters. You must win. Everything is about the team, not about your personal stats.
Henry always pushes. Henry's one of the people for a long time been pushing a shorter schedule, and there's lots of reasons for it, just from a physical standpoint and even a mental and emotional standpoint. We overtax our players, but that's something you said, Ryan, that Henry, we don't argue enough that we probably should. I know some people have, where every game means so much more, right?
Oh, it's in Europe. You just can't imagine. We lost, and obviously it's the playoffs, so it's different. But, throughout the season with Simone Piangiani, and the Jerusalem fans are amazing, and the experience there is amazing. But we were winning at a high level in the Euro Cup. We ended up going to the Final Four, and we won the preseason cup. We ended up winning the title, but we had a stretch where we lost 4 games in a row. And we were having an unbelievable year in the Euro Cup, which was our focus. Our focus was on the Euro Cup first, the Israeli League second. The way we prepared for it, our focus for it was totally different. And the fans were calling to fire Simone. And fortunately, we lost 4 games in a row, and we are the number 1 seed in the Euro Cup in our group, and we're having an amazing year. And fortunately, we had a very strong GM in Guy Harrell that didn't listen to it. And then ended up, fans were upset with him. And fortunately, we won the title, and which I was so happy for Simone and for Guy because they stuck with it. But we lost 4 games in a row, and it was fire the coach, fire the coach. And that year, Maccabi Tel Aviv fired more coaches in one season than the entire NBA did.
Wow, that's amazing. Henry, don't you agree that if the games mattered more, fans would feel it, that intensity would be there because there's less games to begin with?
Oh, I mean, like football, right? Like it's tragedy
like
if you lose in NFL football. And not to mention, Ryan, then you're charged with player development, but do you have the time to do those things, right? Like you don't have much time in the practice gym, I'm guessing.
You have to make it a priority. And I think that goes everywhere because everyone talks about player development at all levels, college, G League, Europe, pro, and people don't really buy into it. Once you start losing games, once the season starts, you're so focused on the team. And you can run great actions, you can run great plays to get a shooter wide open, but if he doesn't have the right footwork, the right setup coming off the screen, he's not going to be open, or you're not improving his chance to make the shot to win the game or put yourself in position to win the game. And so I think you have to have a player development mindset always. And so what we tried to do this year was 30 to 40 minutes before practice, and we split guys into groups. So half of the team would come early, and 6 players would be with 4 coaches. We tried to limit it towards 1 to 2 players. Sometimes we had to have a little bit more in player development for 30 to 40 minutes. We'd practice, and then the other 6 guys would do their player development after practice, and then both groups would lift. But I think you have to keep that player development mindset specifically in the G League, because that's one thing you have to hang your hat on. That's, guys continuously improving throughout the season. And being that my background has been with Coach Thorpe for so long, that's what I've believed in. And everywhere I've done it, including in Jerusalem, we did player development before practice, after practice. And I tried to make sure this year, even on off days, from starting with Coach, my big selling point to him was I have a never say no policy. I'll be available anytime. And, there were multiple times, at 21, 22, 25, where Kevin Martin would text me and I'd be at the dinner with my wife or in the middle of a movie. Hey, let's go shoot. It's 9, 10 o'clock at night and I leave the movie, mid-movie. And that was the same mentality I tried to have this year as a head coach, to where our assistant coaches, were in charge of player development for specific players, but I wanted to make sure even on off days I was rebounding for them, not to take over what the assistant coach was doing in the player development. So the player knew I was there for them and nothing was beneath me. I was there to rebound for him, let the assistant coach run the player development workout, but I would be there every day, every off day, every workout, never say no. And fortunately, I have a wife that understands it and a family that understands that. But I think that's the mindset you have to create everywhere, but specifically to the G League. And I think, as a leader, that's something I learned from Coach Thorpe. He would oftentimes come in and say, okay, you're going to run the workout today, and I'm going to watch and evaluate and help and rebound. And so I tried to have that servant leadership mindset with our players this year. And so I wanted them to see that nothing is beneath anyone. It's not beneath the head coach to rebound for the assistant and sit there and be quiet and be.
Or sweep the floors first. Or sweep the floors.
That's normal.
Yeah, as coaches, this is what we do. Ryan, you have a story that's pretty incredible, but you did something to build your network. I used to always say what you would say. We go to Vegas and you kind of follow me around like a puppy dog, constantly texting me, where are we going next, Dad? What's happening? Because you didn't know anyone. But I personally think your network's much bigger than mine, or at least close to it, and I'm much, much older than you. Talk about what you did at Vegas Summer League to build the kind of network that you have now.
Well, I stalked you and Steve Kyler everywhere that you went, texting you. And fortunately, you and Steve Kyler both were constantly trying to introduce me to people, to get me into parties, to get me into dinners, to help me network and grow. But what I tried to do is rent a car. And at the time, I was talking to one of our assistants. I've been coaching for 16 years, and 3 years out of the 16, I've made decent money. So I always looked at Las Vegas and every.
You're shooting 3 for 16.
Yeah, 3 for 16.
Yeah.
Terrible. As my wife tells me, it's about time to start making money. And I've always had the mentality to chase opportunity, not money. And if you chase an opportunity, and I was never going to miss out on a job because of money. And I think that's the biggest mistake coaches make, especially young coaches make, where they say, I can't afford to do that. And I was never going to say that. And so I always had the mentality of relationship building. And I thought everywhere you went, you wanted to focus on relationship building, because at the end of the day, people hire who they know, or people hire someone that's recommended to them by people that they know. And starting out in Las Vegas, the very first year that I went, Coach Thorpe actually didn't go. I was trying to network and meet people, and nobody would talk to me. And so I left that year. I was like, man, I just spent a couple $1,000s. I don't really have the money. How can I change it the next year? And so same thing, I invested the money. Fortunately, my wife looked at it as it's an investment. It's, just like investing in stocks, I'm investing in myself and my career. And I decided to rent a car, because what I noticed is everyone needs a ride. Everyone's taking taxis. Everyone's, that was before Ubers. Everyone needed a ride. And so I rented a car with the mentality of, if I could drive people around, I'd get 15 minutes alone with them. So everywhere I went, I didn't really watch any games. I would walk around the hallways, networking, meeting people. I had business cards printed, handed them out, and someone would be like, "Oh, I have to go here. Oh, you need a ride? Can I take you there?" And I was fortunate because it allowed me to network and build with people that were much more important to me, and it got me quality time with them. Instead of being able to spend time with 20 people around the circle, it was 2, 3, 4 people, and they remember that. And
like who was in your cab?
Some would say the most. I was very fortunate to take Fred Hoiberg
Cool.
years ago, which I was trying at 33 to be an intern in the NBA and work for free, but nobody would hire me. And they said I was too old and too experienced. And it's like, okay. And Fred Hoiberg was one, he really considered and tried to hire me as an intern. And I'm forever grateful to him. And I put together all these international plays, European plays, which he gets. And, we were driving around. He's like, "Want to come up to my hotel room and watch my video playbook?" And I was like, "Is this the greatest day of my life?" Sorry, what? And so I got to drive him around. I got to drive Erie Messina around, which at that time I'd coach in Europe, which, sorry to Fred Hoiberg, who is the man. That guy is awesome. I mean, he's unbelievable as a person, but I got to drive Erie Messina around. I mean, EuroLeague legend, which my love for European basketball, I think it's the greatest game in the world, the most beautiful game, was awesome. And I started to do that. People were holding coaching clinics. People were holding different networking events. And I started to ask them, "Oh, is there anyone I can drive there? Does a speaker need a ride instead of taking a taxi?" And so I tried to use that to my advantage. And I did it last year as a head coach of a G League team. And if there's summer league this year, I'll do it again. Just keep trying to drive people around.
Awesome.
I wouldn't expect any summer league.
Might
be fall league. I don't think it's gonna be summer league. I don't think it's gonna happen.
Don't push that on us, Ricky Bobby.
So Ryan, I do speak in movie cliches all the time. Everybody love everybody is one of ours. Ryan, so you also, when you talk about social media, we're about done here, but for anyone that loves this kind of stuff, you don't do it as much now, but you have on your Twitter account at Ryan Pannone, I think it is, you've been posting great European set plays, inbounds plays, half court actions, whatever. And when you interviewed, I'm not going to go into great detail, but when you interviewed with Alvin Gentry, and I prepped you the night before when you were in Jerusalem, we were prepping all sorts of stuff. The first thing is tell them what he said to you when you first got him on the phone.
First off, for anyone that doesn't know Alvin Gentry, what an unbelievable man. So I'm speaking with Alvin Gentry about the G League head coaching job. And, he tells me, he's like, "Hey, I get all your sets on Twitter and I've tried to run some throughout the year. It's great stuff." And the most amazing part ever is he's trying to sell me on the job. Alvin Gentry, I'm on the phone to him. He's like, I think this would be really good for your career. And, I view you as just part of our program as an assistant coach. And for the people that don't know Alvin Gentry, he is one of the greatest human beings of all time. And I'm sitting there like, Alvin Gentry's trying to sell me on the job. I had to stop. I was like, "Coach, you don't have to sell me. If you offer me the job, I'm 100% coming. No questions asked." I got off the phone and, he later told me, he told David Griffin, Trajan Lane, he goes, "Well, that was the easiest phone call I had to make. I didn't have to sell him on anything." And I called Coach Thorpe and Brian Elfis, my agent. I was like, "An NBA head coach just tried to convince me to take a job. This is the greatest day ever." Outside of sitting with Fred Hoiberg. Fred Hoiberg was the greatest day ever. And then when Alvin Gentry, I interviewed with him, it was, what a humble man and unbelievable person Alvin Gentry.
Everybody loves him. Everyone loves him. Henry, you want to bring on Gerard so we can wrap it up?
I do. Of course I do. But wait, one thing really, Judy, maybe you could hit the Gerard button while I'm asking this question quick. But Gerard joins us every time. Hi, Gerard. 1 second. I'm just going to get in this question. Up? What are your G League players doing now?
So they've all gone home, except one, because there's a little bit of of the virus where he is, and so he's kind of staying a little bit in the area. But they're all home, and I started to call some of them on the way down to make sure that they're doing something to get better. Right? Most guys at this time, because they can't go outside, they're sitting at home watching Netflix. They're sitting at home whatever it is, doing nothing. I tried to call him and tell, hey, this is a great time to watch film. This is a great time to study your film, great time to study players, things that you can add, great time to find a way to get better, to get an edge, because I tried to tell them throughout the year that there's only 550 jobs in the world that pay $1 million or more for players. No one's going to hand it to you. You've got to find a way to get edge. So they're home with their families. Fortunately, they're all safe. All of their families are so far safe. And, trying to get them to think about how can they take this time to get an edge on something, to get better. And I try to convince one of our players that he should be doing a lot of closeouts and defensive slides in his house because he don't guard anybody.
I believe it.
Gerard, you take the floor, please, sir.
No problem. Ryan, this is a great talk. I'm just curious. I'm wondering if we're going to get more of the European model and influence in the NBA. I'm someone who I'm not bound by American exceptionalism, right? I think there's great things all around the world that we could be using. And the European sport model in terms of academy is one thing that I'm a huge proponent of. And then in terms of the play style, because if you get that done over here with, the best basketball players in the world, like how much better is the NBA game and just the sport model going to be here?
Well, I think a few things, one thing you touched about, not just from a sport model, but, I've been able to visit 40 different countries. I've been able to live in China, Germany, Israel, Slovakia, South Korea, some. And I think the biggest mistake we make as Americans is we think, and I grew up not traveling. And so the fact that I travel all over the world now to my family and friends is like amazing, because we don't really leave Clearwater, Florida, like Coach Thorpe. There's like a boundary. He never leaves Clearwater, Florida. And first thing you realize is, we have the mentality that the way that we do it is the best. We're the best at everything. The American way is the best. And there is something in every country that would make us much better culturally and as a country, and including in China. People look down on China. There are things as a country that are ingrained in their culture that we could steal and add to our country that would make us a much better society and much more successful. And then I think from a sports standpoint, right, like there's no monopoly on the game. The best coaches in the game aren't just American coaches that are either, it's not bound by race, by gender, as we're seeing as a lot of females or
you have a female coach. You have a female assistant.
We have a female coach and we have a two-way coach, and both played in the WNBA and in Europe, and Teresa Weatherspoon and Mary Andrade. And, the mentality that we have is right. And obviously for a long time, it was the white male American is the best. And then now obviously we're seeing more and more influence with former players and minorities, and now we're seeing with gender. And I've been around the world. I've been fortunate, and when I say fortunate to coach with female coaches where there's no monopoly on this game. No one owns the right to it. And there are great coaches in Asia, Europe, South America, North America, Canada, and male and female, and all different races. And that's something that was, very fortunate to learn and see. And in Europe, obviously what we've seen in the NBA is the NBA began to have the mentality to get the best players in the world, not just the best players from North America. Now, over 33% of the NBA is international. And I think what you're going to see the next step is to get the best coaches in the world, right? And the best coaches in the world aren't only in America. In Europe, those guys are high level. In Asia, great coaches. In South America, great coaches. And I think what you're going to see more of on NBA benches, that there are international coaches. And eventually, just like there's 33% of international players, every coaching staff is going to have one or two or three international coaches, because their mindset and their view on the game is so different. And the way that it's impacting the game, I think if you look at, some of the better teams in the NBA and some of the sustained cultures in the NBA, obviously the Spurs, the Warriors, and even it's something Alvin Gentry talked about. He was one of the first coaches to hire an international coach. And he talks about it all the time in practice. Move the ball, space the ball. And a year ago, they had more 30 assist games than I think any NBA team. But it's having an impact. And I think that's one thing that's such a compliment to the European game is you hear NBA coaches talk about all the time, We're trying to play the European way, the European system, the European movement. And if you combine the talent and athleticism of the American players with the spacing and movement and togetherness and team play of the international game, it'd be amazing.
Yeah, I'll add the word tactical, which is the word you used earlier. That's a word that comes out all the time when you're talking to European coaches, is the word tactical. And you just not hear that very much in American coaches.
The European regular season is like the NBA finals and like March Madness.
Right.
And, in college, an example, they try to steal from the NBA, which is a mistake. If you're a college coach, you should be bringing over high-level international coaches, adding them, number one, to your staff, but two, instead of paying the Navy SEALs to come in and destroy your players for $20,000, pay a European coach to come over and watch your practices and evaluate it, because the rules are similar, especially now with the three-point line moving back, but there's no defensive 3 seconds. You can practice and teach your players the way that the Europeans do, which is a little bit harder in the NBA. But the difference is this: in Europe, right, it's so tactical, and it makes you such a better coach because every game matters. And literally, coaches are fired in the preseason of the first year on their deal for losing too much in the preseason. And so you prepare for every game, including the preseason, as if you might get fired. And in the NBA, obviously we see it, the tactics really arise more specifically in the playoffs.
In the postseason, yeah.
It's all or nothing. And in college, you see it a little bit more in March Madness. But imagine having to prepare for 70 games as if you could get fired for any loss. And I was almost fired in the preseason as a head coach in Slovakia. And then I was almost fired in the first 9 games. And, we had a bunch of injuries, and we started 5-4, which was unacceptable. And if I would have lost the next game, I would have got fired. And then fortunately we finished 26-11. But that's every game matters. Every possession matters. And so you're preparing with that mindset.
And I appreciate Ryan very much. When you and I talk on the phone, we frequently finish with "I love you." So I'll do the same thing here. I love you, young man. You're a special person. Henry, you want to wrap it up?
Yeah, you guys, thank you so much. Tomorrow, Dwayne Casey's going to be here. Yeah, it'll be exciting.
International coach.
International coach. All right. So let's quick brainstorming. What should I ask him?
Just anything that's tactical. Ask him all about basketball questions. That way I can watch and learn.
Okay, sounds good. You can join the chat and just fire in questions all the time. I won't understand what you're talking about, but that's fine. I'd like to thank my sister. I'm glad she's feeling better. And thank you, everyone, for joining us today. We'll see you at 11 o'clock Eastern tomorrow. Bring it in. Thank you, Coach Pannone. Thank you, David Thorpe. Thank you, Gerard.
See you guys.
Thanks, guys.